These tales are absolutely wild, let me tell you. It's a heartbreaking one, this story I'm about to share. Someone advised me to leave out all the names to keep everyone's privacy safe, and I'm sticking to that plan. This whole thing comes with 5 updates, so buckle up. Here's the big question I'm wrestling with. Am I wrong for wanting to end my marriage after learning I've got a rare condition and discovering my children aren't biologically mine? So here's how it all kicked off. I'm a 44-year-old guy, and just recently, doctors told me I've got Arden-Weiss syndrome, or AWS, after months of feeling off with some odd symptoms. It all began with nagging headaches and blurry eyesight, followed by spells of dizziness that threw me off balance. I bounced between different doctors and experts, and eventually they spotted tumors growing in my brain and pancreas. After running genetic tests, the specialist confirmed it's AWS, a condition they told me gets passed down through families. If you've got this disease, there's a 50-50 shot your kids inherit it too. That's how it works. And this is where my world started crumbling. The genetic counselor recommended we test my 3 kids, ages 15, 13, and 10, because catching it early can make a huge difference for their health down the road. Sounds logical, doesn't it? But then the test results rolled in, and not one of them showed the AWS markers, not a single kid. The counselor gently pointed out how unusual that was, statistically speaking. Let me give you a little about me. I'm a structural engineer, been hitched for 16 years, and I met my wife way back through a buddy at a photography show in town. She's into real estate photography, snapping pics for fancy property listings, and we went out for a couple of years before tying the knot. Pretty standard stuff, raising kids, cheering at soccer matches, taking family trips, hosting backyard cookouts, all that normal middle-class life until these health problems popped up about 8 months ago. The trouble started with headaches here and there. Then my vision got spotty, like little floaters dancing in front of my eyes, and I figured it was just stress from squinting at blueprints all day. Then came the dizziness, hitting me hard one day during a regular check at a construction site. I nearly took a tumble off some scaffolding, and that's when I knew I had to see a doctor. At first, they thought it might be an inner ear issue, or maybe migraines messing with me. But then a CT scan revealed tumors in my brain, and an MRI uncovered more in my pancreas. So they sent me to specialists for a pile of extra tests and scans. After all that, the genetics crew suggested checking for AWS, and the results came back crystal clear. I've got the mutation. The counselor sat me down and explained that AWS doesn't just show up out of nowhere. It's something you inherit, handed down from your family line, which got me thinking about my folks. My dad passed away young in a freak accident, but my mom's still kicking and healthy as ever. I started piecing together a medical family history to figure this out. When the doctors brought up testing the kids, my wife acted strange. She suggested holding off, saying I should focus on my own health first. But the specialist stressed how vital early screening was, and I agreed it couldn't wait. She kept coming up with excuses to push back their appointments, and that weird vibe from her started gnawing at me. So, I went poking around in our old paperwork, hunting for family health records, and stumbled across some odd documents tucked away in the back of her home office filing cabinet. There were medical bills from before each kid was born, not from her usual doctor, but from different clinics, with unfamiliar charges showing up on ancient credit card statements. Then yesterday, the genetic counselor called me with the results. The test showed all 3 kids were definitely clear of AWS markers, but that wasn't the whole story. There was something else in those results. Something that suddenly made my wife's odd behavior and those hidden papers click into place. Now I've got solid evidence that my kids aren't biologically mine, on top of dealing with tumors sprouting in my brain and pancreas and 16 years of deception to untangle. The counselor hooked me up with a therapist to help process it all. My lawyer says I've got a straightforward case for divorce, but my wife's relatives are flooding my phone with messages, claiming I'm tearing our family apart over some medical mix-up. So, am I the jerk for filing for divorce while staring down this serious illness? Here's an update. After that counseling session, I spent a week digging even deeper. Those medical bills I found weren't just random. They came from a private fertility specialist, dated a few months before each of my kids arrived. The same doctor's name popped up on every single record, which was bizarre. We'd never struggled to have kids. At least, that's what I always believed. But then the credit card statements painted a different picture, showing regular charges at a swanky hotel near where she did her real estate photography gigs. Those hotel charges always popped up on days she had her property twilight shoots. Now, twilight shoots are when she'd photograph luxury homes at sunset to make them look extra stunning. But these hotel bookings were from 1:30 to 4:30 p.m., not exactly sunset hours. I dug up receipts stretching back 15 years, kicking off right before our oldest came into the picture. And that's when I decided to face the fertility clinic armed with my medical power of attorney. Since getting hit with the AWS diagnosis, I've needed every scrap of family medical history I could get my hands on. The clinic's files showed my wife had been a patient there 3 times, once in 2008, again in 2010, and then in 2013, each visit lining up perfectly with when our kids were conceived. But here's the kicker. I never dropped off any sperm samples for her. I'd never even walked through their doors, not once. My oncologist was pushing for a full rundown of our family's medical background to map out my AWS treatment, which meant standard genetic screening for my closest relatives. But those results didn't just come back clear of AWS. They revealed something wilder. The genetic markers pointed to 3 different dads for my kids, and none of them matched my DNA. Looking back, my wife's weird pushback on testing the kids suddenly made sense. She kept nudging me to hold off, saying my tumors should take priority, and even tried talking the genetic counselor into delaying the whole thing. The counselor wasn't having it. She stressed that screening kids for AWS is urgent because tumors can start growing young, and early detection is everything. Then the fertility clinic files spilled even more tea. Each pregnancy used donor sperm, but not from their usual stock. Turns out, my wife brought her own private donor samples to the table. The paperwork painted her as a single lady going for artificial insemination, using her maiden name and paying in cash, no credit trail. The doctor there had no clue she was married, not a hint. I got on the phone with my lawyer right away, and he's dealt with messy medical divorce cases like this before. He told me the combo of my AWS diagnosis, the genetic test bombshell, and those clinic records makes this a slam dunk. He's already filed urgent motions to lock down our assets and set up temporary custody plans while I gear up for tumor treatment. And then the real estate piece clicked into place. Those twilight shoots synced up suspiciously well with her fertility clinic trips. Each pregnancy kicked off after a string of afternoon hotel bookings. But the photos she turned in to the real estate folks, gorgeous sunset shots, were snapped hours after those hotel meetups. When I laid the clinic records out in front of her, my wife finally broke down and spilled it all. 3 different guys over 16 years, all tied to her real estate gigs, big shot clients selling high-end homes. She handpicked them for their genes, tall, fit, successful types. She flat out said she wanted better DNA for her kids than mine could offer, and this was before she even knew about my AWS. She just wanted top-tier dads. The genetic testing I did for my tumors ended up shining a light on everything. Now she's spinning it to family, saying I'm bailing on her and the kids over a health glitch while I'm sick, conveniently skipping the part about 16 years of carefully planned lies. I've got to sit down with the divorce attorney tomorrow, and next week, I'm starting some intense tumor treatment. The genetic counselors are pulling together all the details for the court stuff. I'm guessing a judge won't look too kindly on intentional paternity fraud smack in the middle of a major medical mess. So, am I the bad guy for filing divorce papers right from my oncologist's office? Here's the first update. 6 weeks later, the docs wouldn't let me put off tumor treatment any longer. I kicked off radiation for the brain tumors yesterday, and the genetic counselor rushed everything after uncovering the paternity twist. Apparently, medical deception while someone's fighting cancer lights a fire under the hospital's legal team. Those fertility clinic records turned out to be gold. Each private donor sample came with a basic health rundown. All 3 guys had squeaky clean family histories. No cancer, no genetic hiccups, no inherited conditions. My wife basically went DNA shopping while snapping real estate pics, cherry-picking the best of the best. My lawyer says this shows she'd been plotting this for years, and it's rock-solid proof. You recall those hotel bookings tied to her twilight shoots? The credit card statements laid out a clear rhythm. 3 distinct clients, 3 separate years, each hotel stay booked exactly 2 weeks after she snapped photos of their fancy properties. Every one of those guys lined up perfectly with when our kids were conceived. She didn't pick them at random, she went for their health backgrounds and achievements, a big-time real estate tycoon, a heart surgeon, and a former pro athlete. The genetic counselor's report hit me harder than the radiation sessions ever could. They ran full DNA profiles on all 3 kids, and not one shared a lick of my genes, but each matched up flawlessly with those clients she'd photographed. The timeline clicked into place. Those afternoon hotel meetups flowed right into her fertility clinic visits, where she'd collected and stashed samples from her flings, then handed them over for expert insemination. My AWS treatment sped everything up, forcing all this into the open. My oncologist needed solid family health records to figure out the best plan, and that's when more of her deception unraveled. Each kid's pediatrician had separate files, all filled with paternal histories from these random guys instead of me. She'd kept up this double life of medical records for 16 years straight. My divorce lawyer didn't waste a second. He filed urgent motions, pointing to medical abandonment and fraud, and the judge, after glancing at my brain scans, signed off on temporary orders fast. So, I'm staying put in the house while I go through treatment, and she's hauled herself back to her parents' place. The kids are with me full-time, except for her supervised visits. Judges don't take kindly to someone pulling medical stunts like this during a cancer fight. Oh, and the kids. I had to sit them down and break the news about my AWS, with the genetic counselor stepping in to explain why we tested them and why those results were a big deal. I haven't dropped the bomb about their real dads yet. The family therapist thinks we should hold off until my first round of treatment levels out. They've got enough on their plates watching me kick off radiation. The fertility doc who did the insemination sent over every last file after the court demanded it. She'd planned each pregnancy down to the tiniest detail, tracking her cycles, preserving samples, timing it all just right, even keeping extras frozen as a backup plan. This wasn't some casual slip-up. It was a full-on genetic strategy. Her real estate broker cut ties with her once they heard why I'd filed for divorce. Turns out, using luxury home gigs to snag DNA from rich clients breaks a few professional rules. Fast forward a month for the second update, radiation wrapped up its first stretch, shrinking the brain tumors enough to start planning surgery, though I'm still wrestling with dizziness and spotty vision. The AWS expert says that's par for the course, but the pancreatic tumors need a different approach, which kicks off next week. Remember those detailed health profiles she got from her premium DNA donors? Well, the genetic tests caught something she overlooked. The real estate mogul, dad to our 15-year-old, has hemophilia in his family, and we only found out when our oldest had dental surgery and wouldn't stop bleeding. Now we're juggling hematologist appointments on top of everything else. Speaking of health surprises, the fertility clinic's complete records landed, showing her routine down pat. She'd line up twilight shoots for upscale listings, book hotel rooms 2 weeks later in the afternoon, then waltz into the clinic days after with her private samples in tow. The doc there bought her story about being single and using consenting donors, but now the clinic's facing a probe for sloppy oversight. The real estate mogul's wife got in touch after court papers landed on her doorstep. She'd hired my wife back in 2008 to shoot their home reno project, sparking a months-long fling during those update photo sessions. She had no clue until the DNA results hit their lawyer, and now they're divorcing right alongside me. My oncologist had to tweak my treatment after sorting out the real family medical data. Those fake histories she'd fed everyone for 16 years could have seriously messed me up, since AWS care hinges on accurate genetic info. The tumor board scrapped their old plan and started fresh once the paternity mess came to light. The kids began therapy last week. I still haven't told them about their bio dads, but the therapist's helping me figure out how to ease into that talk. My 12-year-old piped up, wondering why mom's real estate pics aren't popping up on local sites anymore, and the 9-year-old's curious why her business trips now come with court chaperones. The heart surgeon, dad to our 13-year-old, had his lawyer send over a signed statement, swears he had no idea about the fertility clinic and thought their hotel hangouts were just a fling. I haven't heard a peep from the retired athlete, dad to our 9-year-old, though. The retired athlete? He took off overseas years back. His lawyer mailed over some medical files, though, and they dropped more surprises, like a hereditary arthritis risk that would have been handy to know during our youngest sports checkups. My divorce case picked up speed after the latest brain scans hit the table. The judge rushed things along because of my health situation, couldn't wait around with a medical emergency like this. My wife's excuses fell apart when they stacked up 16 years of fertility clinic receipts and hotel logs. Tough to brush that off as a minor mix-up when it's blatant sperm theft and planned insemination. The genetic counselor's final write-up slammed the door on any hope of patching things up. It laid out detailed DNA profiles proving 3 different dads, with dates syncing perfectly to those hotel stays and clinic visits, plus health history showing she'd been scheming for years. The judge didn't mince words, called it the most intentional paternity fraud she'd ever come across in her courtroom. I kicked off a tougher round of treatment yesterday, and my oncologist told me to zero in on getting better. My lawyers got the rest covered, plenty to deal with there. Next update comes after surgery. They're tackling the biggest brain tumor next month, and at least now they've got the real family medical scoop to work from. Fast forward 5 months for the third update. Brain surgery went smoother than anyone hoped. The AWS doc said having the right genetic details made a world of difference in plotting out the treatment. No more guessing around phony family health records. I'm still seeing double sometimes, but the dizziness has mostly cleared out. That hemophilia mess with our oldest got trickier. The real estate mogul's divorce dug up 3 other secret kids he'd had with different women. Then the cardiac surgeon, dad to our 13-year-old, got his medical license yanked last week. The hospital board uncovered proof he'd pulled similar stunts with other women, using his doctor smarts to pick out moms for the best genetic combos. My wife wasn't some one-off for him. She was just another piece in his creepy breeding scheme, one of 6 cases they found in his patient files. That meant our 13-year-old needed heart screening based on the real dad's family history, and they spotted a small valve issue her fake records had skipped. Could have turned serious if we hadn't caught it. The therapist stepped in to help us break down where this new health info came from, and now the kids know the whole deal. The fertility clinic waved the white flag and gave up their license after the state poked around. Turns out my wife wasn't their only shady case. They've been taking private donor samples without proper checks for years, messing up multiple families. Now there's a class action lawsuit brewing, and their files blew the lid off dozens of paternity fraud messes. Meanwhile, that retired athlete who fathered our 9-year-old popped up in Austria. His lawyers sent fresh medical records, not just arthritis risks, but markers for early-onset dementia, which flips everything about our youngest future care. That means more specialists, more tests, and more jaw-dropping reveals. While recovering from treatment, I stumbled across more clues in our home office, a hidden flash drive stuffed with spreadsheets. She'd cataloged potential dads by their health stats, smarts, looks, and bank accounts, ranked them like some genetic shopping list, and set up photo shoots just to get close to these guys. It was straight-up calculated eugenics dressed up as real estate gigs. The divorce court ordered full DNA breakdowns for all 3 kids, and the results locked it in. 3 separate fathers, none of them me, and the judge labeled it flat-out reproductive fraud. My wife's defense attorney bailed after seeing those spreadsheets. Tough to spin, emotional affair, when you've got charts color-coding DNA pics. My AWS treatment threw another curveball. Those pancreatic tumors had probably been growing for years. I might have had symptoms way earlier, but they got shrugged off because she fed the doctor's bogus family history, knew there could be genetic red flags on my side, but buried them while chasing her better donors. The kids are starting to settle into all this, bit by bit. Therapy's been a lifeline for the kids. Some half-siblings from the real estate mogul's other flings got in touch, and it turns out there's this whole web of kids tied together by DNA, all split apart by those real estate photography gigs. Every one of their moms hired the same person behind the camera, my wife, and got the same Twilight shoot set up. I'll give you the next update after the final divorce hearing wraps up. My oncologist says the tumor treatment's looking up now that we've got the real medical facts straight. It's wild how much smoother doctors can operate without wading through a swamp of genetic lies. Here's update 4, 9 months down the road. The final divorce hearing went down yesterday, and the judge took one peek at my latest brain scans, the genetic proof, and those creepy DNA donor spreadsheets from the flash drive, then signed off on everything my lawyer asked for. My wife's cold-blooded reproductive scheme during my health crisis really got under the judge's skin. That class action lawsuit against the fertility clinic? It's ballooned to 47 families now, and my wife's meticulous notes were the key to busting it wide open. Her spreadsheets showed she'd scoped out several clinics, picking this one because they didn't bother checking marital status or donor IDs. She wrote it all down for herself, never dreaming genetic tests would spill the beans. The real estate mogul mess just keeps growing. Beyond the 4 kids we knew about, including our oldest, DNA tests turned up 3 more, all linked to Twilight shoots with different photographers. Then there's the cardiac surgeon, dad to our 13-year-old. His breeding game was way bigger than anyone thought. 13 kids spread across 8 states, all sparked through work connections like he had with my wife. He'd leaned on his doctor know-how to vet moms for the best genetic combos, treating it like some warped lab project. Cost him his license, his practice, and now he's staring down ethics board grilling. Our youngest bio dad, the retired athlete, finally fessed up, his early onset dementia's hitting harder than he expected, and he admitted to a string of flings with photographers, realtors, and anyone else tied to fancy properties. His health files helped track down 8 more half-siblings, all needing dementia risk checks now. Therapy for the kids took a new turn after they met their half-siblings. Current tallies 7 from the mogul, including our oldest, 13 from the surgeon, including our middle kid, and 11 from the athlete, including our youngest. That's 31 kids total, all linked by this calculated DNA fraud, and they've started their own little support crew. My AWS treatment's still moving forward. Latest scans are looking good. Having the true family medical history has been a game changer. The genetic counselor's report turned into a medical ethics lesson. They're using our story to show med students how paternity fraud almost tanked my cancer care. While clearing out the house, I found more proof. Hidden receipt books showing she'd actually billed these guys for her genetic services, disguised as extra photo sessions. But her notes spelled out sperm collection and storage. She wasn't just cherry-picking top-tier DNA. She was running a premium genetic side hustle under the real estate photography mask. The probe into her business uncovered a whole network. Other photographers, other clinics, other families, all tangled up through luxury listings and shady inseminations. The state medical board's guessing there could be hundreds of cases like this. They're dubbing it the golden hour scheme in the legal paperwork. With my treatment still rolling, the kids are sticking with me, and a court-appointed supervisor oversees their visits with their mom. The therapist says they're handling it all pretty darn well, especially since bonding with their half-siblings. Turns out sharing this wild genetic fraud mess builds some tight connections. The next update will be the final one. Just gotta push through 2 more tumor treatment rounds. But at least the docs have the full, legit medical picture now. No more genetic surprises lurking in the shadows. 5th update, a year and a half later, the last one. My AWS treatments are working better than anyone predicted, and the brain tumors are nearly history. The pancreatic tumor's getting smaller every scan. My doctors keep saying that having the real genetic info straight up saved my life. Those fake health histories my wife cooked up could have steered them toward deadly treatment choices. You remember those crazy detailed spreadsheets she used to track her genetic donors? They ended up guiding investigators to similar setups in 12 different states, all linked through upscale real estate photography and shady fertility clinics. Her obsessive note-taking peeled back the lid on a whole network of genetic cherry-picking. That support group for the half-siblings ballooned to 97 kids across 14 states now. The real estate moguls 7, the cardiac surgeons 13, and the athletes 11 were just the tip of the iceberg. Every new DNA test ties more families together, all born from this calculated reproductive trickery. And it all started unraveling because my AWS diagnosis sparked the genetic digging. Court records finally locked in the bio dad's totals. The mogul? 9 more kids popped up, all dealing with bleeding issues like our oldest. The cardiac surgeon lost his license for good. His creepy breeding project racked up 22 kids total, and they all need heart checkups now. The retired athlete's dementia took a sharp turn south, his estate's tangled in lawsuits from 18 women representing 25 kids, all needing tests for early onset risks. The fertility clinic mess went federal. My wife's records blew their whole game wide open. They've been running fraudulent inseminations for rich clients for decades, over 200 cases nailed down so far. The doctor's out of a license and facing jail time. Turns out helping swipe and stash genetic material on purpose breaks some pretty big laws. I found the last puzzle piece while prepping the house for sale, a secret safe in her photography studio stuffed with backup drives, years of Twilight shoot pics, logs of genetic material grabs, and bank statements showing payments masked as deluxe photo deals. She wasn't just along for the ride, she helped build this whole operation. The kids are holding up better than anyone could have hoped. Weekly therapy's keeping them steady, and their half-sibling network just keeps growing. Our oldest is managing his hemophilia like a champ. The middle one's heart condition's under watch, and the youngest gets regular brain checks for dementia signs. They're taking this wild genetic hand they were dealt and turning it into something strong. My ex-wife finally spilled it all in a plea deal. Yep, she's in legal hot water too. She got into this back in her photography internship days, picking up tricks from others running the same hustle, saw it as genetic curation, handpicking top-notch DNA from high-flying guys to craft better kids. Never imagining my AWS test would blow it all apart. The divorce settlement set a new legal benchmark. My medical crew says I'll need AWS checkups for life, but the roughest part's behind me. No more genetic curveballs or phony family backgrounds, just straight facts and solid treatment plans. The genetic counselor swears early catches and real info were the game changers. The final rundown on the golden hour scheme? 49 photographers, 14 fertility clinics, 312 confirmed reproductive fraud cases, over $45 million in fake photography fees, and thousands of doctored genetic records. The kids chose to stick with my last name. Even with the DNA truth out there, said family's not about genetics. They're spot on. We got through AWS, reproductive fraud, and a nationwide mess as a team. DNA might not link us, but battling this together sure did. This is my last update. Sometimes a health diagnosis digs up way more than just medical stuff. In my case, it uncovered a massive genetic fraud ring, but it also taught me what family really means.